oftentimes in my classes, students will come to me, especially after the first major assignment, kind of like where you guys are at right now, and if, after your first module exam, and maybe the results weren't what they expected or they desired, and so they come to me and they say, you know what, Professor, I want to do better. And then I stop them right then. I ask, the first question I ask is, what do you mean by better? And then the second question is, how do you act, or how are you actually going to achieve this improvement? Well, that first question of what do you mean by better really kind of tries to get to this idea of what is a good goal? What is a good goal? And how should you as an individual, but more importantly for our purposes, how should organizations go about creating goals in such a way that it increases the likelihood of their organizational success? And your text talks about specific types of goals, and they call them SMART goals. They use that acronym SMART, and you might have heard that before, but we're just going to talk a little bit about that and why is it so beneficial to the planning process. The first word in that acronym SMART, the first word is specific. Have some specificity with your goals. Again, people say, I want to get better, or they might say, I want to feel better, or as an organization, we want to have more quality. We want our customers to be happier. And in order for you to achieve a goal, you have to have a level of specificity. Specificity creates or gives you a number of things. One is that it gives you a guidance as to what you're going to go after. So when you have a specific goal, it kind of allows you to direct your path in terms of how you're going to proceed to attain that goal. Secondly, and very importantly, it allows you to assess how well you're doing with respect to the goal. If you use, for example, let's say a goal of losing weight, and you say, okay, I want to lose 30 pounds in 12 months. That's a specific goal that you have created. It's quantifiable. It guides you, directs you, because it gives you something to pursue, but also importantly, it allows you to assess your process and assess your actual activity. You can check after 3 months, how much have I lost after 6 months. So that specificity gives you something to go after, gives you something direct, something tangible to go after, and it also helps to in terms of your assessment of how well you're doing with respect to that final goal. So the first one is to have specific goals. Those just generally, hey, I want to do better, I want to feel better, I want to have more productivity. Give yourself something that you can actually measure and assess. And that gets into the second one, measurability, measurement of a goal. You have to be able to somehow quantify your goal in order to, again, tell you whether or not you are achieving what you have set out to do. Now, you have to be careful when I use that. I have to be careful when I use that term measurement, because measurement, or sorry, quantifying often implies that I have to have these real hard numbers, 2.565. I have to have these statistical methods, and that obviously has its place in measurement, in control processes, in organizational planning. But you can also measure things like customer happiness. You can measure things like employee well-being. Those things aren't as necessarily tangible all the times, but they can still be measured. You can use things like surveys, you can use focus groups, and you can find ways to really gauge how well you're doing perhaps in those more intangible types of areas. But nevertheless, you are still measuring. You're not just saying, oh, you know what, yeah, I look around and my employees kind of look like they're, smiling more. Well, that's not very scientific, and unfortunately, it's not going to be very helpful. The same thing when it comes to productivity. You just can't go around and say, oh, you know what, the warehouse looks like it's a little bit, more, or I should say, a little bit fuller in terms of our. Again, very difficult. I think I've seen my workers working later. You have to find a way to measure. You have to have specific measures in place and specific ways to measure those outcomes. So specificity, measurement, The third one is, and it's really, really important, attainable. Attainable. I don't know if you've ever had a situation where you've tried to pursue a goal, you've tried to pursue an objective that was obviously well outside of the realm of possibility for you. Again, if we go back to the losing weight example, if you try to say lose 50 pounds in one day, it's not going to happen. And so organizations have to ensure that the goals that they set for themselves, the goals that they set for their employees, are some things or are activities or outcomes that employees can actually achieve. Now we have to be careful. There is a distinction between attainable and challenging. And so the goal doesn't have to be necessarily easy to afford it attainability. The goal can still be challenging and should, to some regard, be challenging, but it should be realistic enough that even if or if an employee or the organization does what it's supposed to do, then it could, in all likelihood, attain it. Okay, so make it attainable, but also consider that it has to be rather relatively challenging, because you don't want to just throw out easy goals. Okay, if in your example, if you say, "Oh, my goal is to get to class on Monday," okay, relatively easy goal, and you can most likely attain that. But if you attain that, you won't say, "Oh, I've done something special." But if you were to say, "You know what, my goal is to ensure that I'm in class every single day," challenging, but definitely attainable. Okay, definitely attainable. So it has to be attainable. So specific, measurable, attainable. The fourth one has to be relevant. What do we mean by relevant? Well, organizations, especially in today's society, they try to measure everything. A lot of times they kind of go to the extreme of, we want to quantify everything. We have all of these great goals, or at least in their perception, great goals that we want to attain. The reality is, not every goal is particularly relevant. At least not every goal is relevant to what the organization is trying to achieve. So for example, if the organization's strategy is to become much more innovative, is to increase its level of innovation, then a goal that might be relevant to that is the number of new patents or the number of new products that the organization introduces. Okay, a goal that might not be necessarily relevant to that, may not be, as I said, is the level of absenteeism of its employees. Now, there may be an argument that suggests that, if absenteeism is increased, the innovation decreases. Yeah, but one can potentially argue that goal, or that measure, if you will, absenteeism, is not really specifically relevant to the goal of innovation. If we look at customer satisfaction, again, the goal is to increase our level of customer satisfaction by 50%. A relevant measure, a relevant outcome for that might be something like customer retention. A goal that might not be as relevant to that specific target, that specific domain of customer retention, might be the number of training hours supply chain managers undergo. Okay, so you have to ensure that your goal, what you're measuring, what you're going after, is actually relevant to the specific thing, the specific outcome or strategy that you're employing. So that's number 4, relevance. And the last one is timing. Timing. That's the deal. We have to place specific deadlines and tenures on our goal. Okay, why? Because again, it drives us, it gives us a level of motivation, it guides us, it allows us to assess how we're doing. If there are no deadlines, if we don't feel some type of pressure, and I have to be careful again with pressure, it's not some kind of dysfunctional pressure, but it is actually a functional pressure that helps us in terms of our ability to attain that goal. we have to give ourselves that deadline. And if there isn't a time frame associated with our goals, again, we will be uncertain as to if we are pursuing our goals correctly, and we will definitely be it will be problematic or very challenging or difficult for us to assess whether or not we have achieved our goals. So deadlines provide motivation, but they also provide some structure to allow us to assess how we're doing and if we have attained our goals. So remember that. And when you set your goals in life, as well as when you set your goals organizationally, you want them to be smart, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, meaning that they are tied to whatever plan you are pursuing. And lastly, they have to have some measure of tenure and timing associated with them.